The dust on Kepler 438b had a way of getting into everything. Commander Elena Vasquez wiped her visor for the third time that hour, squinting at the mineral scanner in her gloved hands. The readings were strange, showing deposits of rare Earth elements that shouldn't exist this far from the planet's core. She made a mental note to send a probe deeper into the canyon tomorrow. Her transport rover sat 2 kilometers behind her, a small dot against the orange horizon. She had insisted on doing this survey alone, despite protests from her team. Elena preferred the solitude of frontier worlds. Out here, with just the wind and the rocks, she didn't have to think about the family she'd lost to raiders 5 years ago. Didn't have to remember her daughter's laugh or her husband's smile. The attack came without warning. 3 figures emerged from behind a rock formation, their movements too quick to be colonists, pirates, raiders, the same kind of filth that had destroyed her life. Elena's hand went to her sidearm, but a plasma bolt struck the ground near her feet before she could draw. The heat blast threw her backward, and she felt something crack in her ribs. Terran mining codes, one of them said in broken English, his translator struggling with the words, "Give us." Elena spat blood onto the orange dirt. Go to hell, another bolt, this time closer. The pain in her side exploded into agony. Through the haze, she could see them clearly now. Forgotti pirates, their gray skin marked with tribal scars. They were known for being thorough. They would torture her for the access codes, then kill her slowly. She reached for her communicator, but a heavy boot crushed her hand. Bone snapped. Elena screamed. "Codes," the leader repeated, "or we take pieces until you tell us." Elena's vision blurred. Blood pooled beneath her. This was how it ended, then. Alone on a frontier world, just like she'd always expected. She only hoped it would be quick. The sound that came next was unlike anything she'd heard before, a chittering, clicking noise that rose and fell like a song. The Vorgothi turned, weapons raised. Elena tried to focus to see what was happening. Insectoid forms, dozens of them, emerged from crevices in the rocks. They were each about the size of a large dog, with crystalline carapaces that gleamed in the setting sun. Their multiple eyes reflected light like jewels. Elena recognized them from the colony briefings. Xelati, the peaceful merchant species that traded along the frontier routes. The Vorgothi leader laughed. "Bugs, you think bugs scare us?" He fired at the nearest Xelathi. The plasma bolt struck its carapace and scattered into harmless light. The creature didn't even flinch. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. The Xelathi moved as one, flowing over the rocks like water. They didn't carry weapons, but they didn't need them. Their natural armor turned the plasma fire into light shows. Their mandibles, when they chose to use them, cut through the Vorgothi's armor like paper. It was over in seconds. The 3 pirates lay unconscious, wrapped in some kind of sticky substance that hardened on contact with air. The Xelathi ignored them and converged on Elena. She tried to push herself up to show she wasn't helpless. Her body refused to cooperate. Strong limbs, surprisingly gentle, lifted her. Multiple voices chittered in a language that sounded like wind chimes. "Please," Elena managed. "My rover. Medical kit." One of the Xelathi, larger than the others and bearing more elaborate markings, moved closer. Its antennae brushed Elena's face, and she felt a strange tingling sensation. When it spoke, the words came through her communicator's translator, but with an odd musical quality. "Your rover is too far. You will die before we reach it. We must take you to our colony." "No hospitals there," Elena said. Her words were slurring now. "Just let me die here." "That is not acceptable," the large Xelathi said. "I am Hive Mother Shrix. You are under our protection now." Elena wanted to argue, but darkness was pulling at her. The last thing she felt was the gentle swaying motion as they carried her deeper into the canyon. She woke to pain and the smell of something sweet, like honey mixed with minerals. The ceiling above her was made of the same crystalline material as the Xelathi's carapaces, glowing softly with internal light. Elena tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every part of her body screamed in protest. "Be still." Shrix appeared beside her, along with 2 smaller Xelathi that Elena guessed were medical attendants. "You were badly injured. Your species is fragile. How long?" Elena's throat felt like sandpaper. 3 days. We had to use emergency procedures. Your council will not be pleased with us. Elena processed this slowly. What kind of procedures? Shrix's antennae twitched in what Elena would later learn was the Xelathi equivalent of a worried gesture. We do not usually share our medical technology. There are treaties, agreements. But you were dying. I made a choice. You saved my life. Yes, and now there will be complications. Political ones. Elena managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Politics. Even out here on the frontier. Over the following weeks, Elena learned the truth of Shrix's words. The Zelathi colony received several stern messages from both human and Zelathi authorities. Apparently, the medical procedures used on Elena involved biotechnology that the Zelathi kept closely guarded. By using them on a human, Shrix had violated several interspecies treaties. Elena also learned that the Zelathi were nothing like she'd expected. They were peaceful, yes, but not weak. Their colonies functioned as perfect democracies, each member's voice equal in the hive mind communications. They had no weapons because they'd never needed them. Their natural defenses were enough to discourage most predators and pirates. Shrix visited Elena every day as she recovered. The hive mother was old by Zelathi standards, her carapace showing hairline cracks that spoke of centuries of life. She told Elena about her people's history, about the trade routes they maintained, about the children being born in the deeper chambers. "Why did you save me?" Elena asked one day. "You knew it would cause problems." Shrix's antennae swayed thoughtfully. "Because it was right. Your people have a saying, yes, about doing the right thing even when it is hard?" "We have several," Elena admitted. "Your species is young, violent, emotional, but also capable of great loyalty. I have watched humans at the trading posts. You form bonds that last lifetimes. You remember debts. These are rare qualities in the galaxy." Elena thought about her family, about the bonds that had been severed by violence. Sometimes those bonds get us killed. Perhaps. But a life without bonds is not worth living. 3 months after the attack, Elena was finally cleared to return to the human colony. Her ribs had healed along with her hand, though the doctors said she'd always have some stiffness in her fingers. The Zelathi medical technology had done its work well. On her last day in the colony, Elena asked to speak with Shrix privately. The hive mother led her to a chamber deep in the colony, where the walls glowed with bioluminescent patterns. "I need to give you something," Elena said. She pulled out a small metal disc from her pocket. It was her family crest, the only thing she'd kept from her old life. "This is a token of my bloodline. In human tradition, it represents an oath." Shrix's antennae quivered with curiosity. "What oath?" Elena met the alien's multifaceted gaze. "If ever you call, I will answer. If ever you fall, I will stand. You saved my life when you had no reason to. You risked your own people's anger to help a stranger. I owe you a debt, Hive Mother Shrix. And humans always pay their debts. This is not necessary. We did what was right." "That's exactly why it's necessary." Elena pressed the disc into one of Shrix's manipulator limbs. "Keep this. If you ever need help, send it to me. Anywhere in human space, I'll find a way to see it. And I'll come." Shrix held the small metal disc up to the light, studying the engraved symbol. "Your people are strange, Elena Vasquez. You turn simple kindness into eternal obligation." "We turn it into loyalty," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." "Perhaps." Shrix carefully stored the disc in a small pouch on her carapace. "I hope I never need to call upon this oath, but I will keep your token safe." Elena smiled, though her eyes were wet. "I hope you never need it either. But if you do, I'll be there. I swear it." They stood together in the glowing chamber, human and Zelathi, two beings from different worlds bound by a promise. Shrix's council had called her foolish for saving the human. They said it would bring trouble. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to involve in their peaceful existence. But as Shrix watched Elena leave the colony, walking tall despite her recent injuries, she felt she had made the right choice. There was something in the human's eyes, a fierce determination that spoke of unbreakable will. The galaxy was changing, becoming more dangerous. Perhaps having a human who owed you a debt wasn't such a bad thing after all. Elena returned to her survey work, but something had changed in her. The emptiness left by her family's death was still there, but it felt different now. She had a purpose again, a reason to become stronger. She owed a debt to the beings who had saved her, and Elena Vasquez always paid her debts. Within a year, she had transferred from survey work to the Terran Defense Force. Her experience on the frontier, combined with her natural leadership abilities, saw her rise quickly through the ranks. She never forgot the Zelathi colony. never forgot the weight of the oath she'd sworn. The metal disc sat in Shrix's private chamber, gathering dust as the years passed. The Hive Mother would sometimes take it out and study it, wondering if the human had truly meant those words. Humans were known for their passion, but also for their short attention spans. Would Elena really remember after 5 years? 10, 20? Shrix didn't know, but she kept the disc safe just in case. After all, she had seen something in Elena's eyes that day. Something that suggested when humans made promises, they carved them into their very souls. The galaxy continued its slow turn, unaware that a debt had been incurred. A debt that would one day shake the foundations of galactic politics. Because the Zelathi had helped a human, and humans never forgot those who helped them. Years later, when darkness came for the Zelathi, they would learn the truth of that promise. They would learn that when humans swore oaths, they meant them with every fiber of their being. They would learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their technology. It was their memory. 16 years had passed since Shrix saved the human on Kepler 438b. The Hive Mother was old now, even by Zelathi standards. The cracks in her carapace had deepened and her movements were slower than they once were. But her mind remained sharp, and her concern for her people had only grown with age. The first disappearance happened along the Theta route, a trade corridor that the Zelathi had maintained for 3 centuries. The merchant vessel Crystal Song failed to arrive at its destination. Initial reports suggested engine failure, perhaps a navigation error. These things happened occasionally in the vastness of space. Then the second ship vanished, and a third, and a fourth Shrix stood in the colony's command chamber, surrounded by her council members. Holographic displays showed the trade routes that had been the lifeblood of their civilization. Red marks indicated the missing ships, 12 in total over the span of 6 months. It's the Krynoth, Ambassador Talon said. His carapace was a darker shade than Shrix's, marked with the silver bands that indicated his diplomatic status. Their empire has been expanding aggressively for the past 5 years. They've annexed 4 neutral systems already. Council member Vixel clicked his mandibles in disagreement. The Krynoth have never bothered us before. We have nothing they want. That was before, Talon said. Before they discovered that Zelathi Prime sits on one of the largest deposits of neutronium in this sector. Silence fell over the chamber. Neutronium was the rarest element in the known galaxy, essential for advanced shield technology and faster-than-light engines. A single kilogram could power a warship for years. How do they know about the deposits? Shrix asked quietly. That information was classified. I suspect we have a spy, Talon said. Someone sold the geological surveys to the Krynoth. It doesn't matter how they found out. What matters is what they'll do now that they know. Shrix moved to the largest holographic display, studying the positions of Krynoth military vessels. They were slowly encircling Zelathi space like predators preparing to strike. Have you presented this to the Galactic Council? 3 times, Talon said, and the bitterness in his voice was unusual for a Zelathi. They call it an internal border dispute. They say the Krynoth have the right to patrol their own territory and that we should negotiate. Negotiate with slavers and conquerors? Vixel's voice rose in pitch. The Krynoth don't negotiate. They demand, they take, they destroy. Shrix had seen the reports of what happened to species conquered by the Krynoth Dominion. The Reptilian Empire believed in a strict hierarchy, with themselves at the top and everyone else's resources to be exploited. They had exterminated entire civilizations that refused to submit. We need allies, Shrix said. We cannot face the Krynoth alone. Who would ally with us? Another council member asked. We're merchants, not warriors. We have no military, no weapons, no fleet. We offer nothing of strategic value to the major powers. We offer our trade routes, our knowledge, our neutronium deposits, Talon interrupted, which is exactly why no one will help us. Every major power wants those deposits for themselves. If they let the Krynoth take us, they can always negotiate with the Krynoth later, or conquer them and take the deposits by force. The brutal political calculation hung in the air like poison. The Zelathi had spent centuries being neutral, being peaceful, being the friendly merchants that everyone liked but no one protected. Over the following months, the situation deteriorated. More ships disappeared. Krynoth vessels began patrolling the borders of Zelathi space openly, no longer pretending to respect their sovereignty. Talon traveled to a dozen worlds pleading for assistance, for intervention, for anything. He returned empty-handed every time. The council won't act, he reported at an emergency session. They say they need proof of hostile intent, proof. As if missing ships and military buildups aren't proof enough. Shrix felt the weight of her years pressing down on her. She had lived through peaceful times, through prosperity and growth. She had watched generations of hatchlings grow into adults, had seen her people thrive, and now she would watch them fall, unless there was another option. That night, alone in her private chamber, Shrix opened an old storage container. Inside, covered in dust, was a small metal disc with a human family crest engraved on its surface. She held it up to the light, remembering the day Elena Vasquez had pressed it into her manipulator limb. If ever you call, I will answer. If ever you fall, I will stand, human words. Human promises. The other council members had called it sentiment, meaningless emotion. Humans were violent, yes, but also unreliable. They fought among themselves constantly. What were the chances that one human officer would remember a promise made 16 years ago? But Shrix remembered Elena's eyes. The fierce determination, the absolute certainty. Humans might be emotional, but they were also stubborn beyond reason. When they made promises, they seemed to carve them into their very souls. The official announcement came 2 weeks later. The Krynoth Dominion issued a formal declaration, claiming that Zelathi Prime and 7 surrounding systems were now part of Krynoth territory. They gave the Zelathi 30 days to evacuate or submit to Krynoth rule. The Galactic Council issued a strongly worded statement of concern and did nothing else. Shrix called an emergency meeting of the full colony, not just the council. Thousands of Zelathi gathered in the great chamber, their carapaces gleaming under the bioluminescent lights. She told them the truth, holding nothing back. The Krynoth were coming. The council wouldn't help. They had no military, no weapons, no way to defend themselves. What can we do? A young Zelathi asked. We're not fighters. We've never been fighters. We can run, Vixel suggested. Abandon the colony, scatter to other worlds, hope the Krynoth lose interest. They won't, Talon said. They want the neutronium. They'll hunt us down, enslave us, force us to mine the deposits for them. That's what they do. Then we submit, another voice said. Perhaps under Krynoth rule we can survive. Shrix thought of the reports she'd read. The Krynoth didn't believe in mercy or compassion. Species that submitted were worked to death in mines and factories. Their children were taken and raised as servants. Their culture was erased, their language forbidden. I have another option, Shrix said quietly. The chamber fell silent. 16 years ago I saved a human life. That human swore an oath to me, a debt of honor. She gave me a token and told me that if I ever needed help, I should send it to her. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Talon stepped forward. Hive Mother, with respect, that was 16 years ago. Humans are known for their short memories. What are the chances she even remembers you? I don't know, Shrix admitted. But I know we have no other options. The Council has abandoned us. The major powers won't intervene. We have 30 days before the Krynoth arrive with their warships. One human can't stand against a fleet, Vixel said. Perhaps not. But humans are strange. They have concepts we don't fully understand. Honor, loyalty, debt. These things seem to matter to them more than logic or survival. And this human, Elena Vasquez, she looked me in the eyes and swore an oath. It's madness, someone in the crowd said. It's hope, Shrix countered. And hope is all we have left. The council voted. It was close, but ultimately they agreed. They had nothing to lose. If the human ignored the message, they were no worse off than before. If she responded, well, at least they could say they tried. Shrix spent hours crafting the message. She encrypted it with the highest level of security the Zelathi possessed. She included the coordinates of Elena's token, proof that this wasn't a hoax or scam, and at the end she added one single word in English. Help. She sent it through every channel she could access, broadcasting toward human space. The message would take days to reach the nearest human systems, maybe weeks to find its way to Elena specifically. If Elena was even still alive, if she was still in the military, if she remembered. So many ifs. The Krynoth didn't wait for their deadline. 3 days after Shrix sent the message, their fleet arrived at the edge of Zelathi space. 3 massive warships, each large enough to carry thousands of troops. They took up positions around Zelathi Prime and issued their demands. Submit or die. War Master Krathos commanded the Krynoth fleet from his flagship, the Bloodsword. He was a veteran of 30 conquest campaigns, his scales decorated with the symbols of defeated species. To him, the Zelathi were just another weak civilization to be absorbed into the Dominion. He opened a communication channel to the planet below. Zelathi, you have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. Lower your shields, deactivate your defenses, and prepare to receive Dominion forces. If you comply, your deaths will be quick. If you resist, we will make examples of your children. Terran, representing the colony in the negotiations, tried to buy time. We request more time to consider. This is a momentous decision. Kratos laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the communication systems. You insects think you have a choice? We could crack your planet open like an egg. The only reason you're still alive is because we want the neutronium intact. But if you force us to fight, we'll take what we want from your ashes. The channel closed. 24 hours. Shrek sat in her chamber, holding Elena's token. No response had come from human space. Perhaps the message hadn't reached her. Perhaps Elena had forgotten. Perhaps humans didn't really honor their oaths the way they claimed. She should have felt despair, but instead she felt a strange calm. She had done everything she could. If this was the end of the Zelathi, at least they would face it with dignity. Terran entered the chamber. Hive Mother, the council is asking for your decision. Do we surrender? No, Shrek said. We wait. Wait for what? The human isn't coming. It's been days with no response. We wait, Shrek repeated, until the last possible moment. High above Zelathi Prime, Kratos prepared his forces for an easy conquest. The insects had no military, no weapons worth mentioning. This would be over in hours, and he would be celebrated as the commander who brought the neutronium deposits under Dominion control. He didn't know that a message was racing through human space at faster than light speeds. He didn't know that in a command center on Mars, a decorated admiral had just received the coordinates of a token she'd given away 16 years ago. He didn't know that humans never forgot their debts. The storm was rising, and soon the silence would fall. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the Mars Orbital Command Center, reviewing fleet deployment reports when her personal communicator chimed with an urgent priority flag. She almost ignored it. Command staff received hundreds of messages daily, most of them routine, but something about the encryption signature made her pause. The message was short. Coordinates. A single word. And an image that made her breath catch in her throat. Her family crest. The token she'd given to a Zelathi hive mother 16 years ago. Elena's hand trembled slightly as she opened the full message. The coordinates pointed to Zelathi Prime. The word was simple and devastating. Help, ma'am. Lieutenant Marcus Chen, her tactical officer, noticed her expression. Is everything all right? Elena didn't answer immediately. She was reading the attached briefing that had come with the message. Kreneth warships. Demands for surrender. The Galactic Council's refusal to intervene. She saw it all clearly. The Zelathi were facing extinction, and no one would help them, except she'd promised. Chen, get me a priority channel to Admiral Morrison. Highest encryption. Yes, ma'am. Chen moved to comply, but his curiosity was obvious. If I may ask, what's this about? A debt, Elena said quietly. One I'm about to pay. Admiral James Morrison appeared on the holographic display 10 minutes later. He was a career military man, known for his pragmatic approach to galactic politics. Vasquez, this better be important. I'm in the middle of budget negotiations. I need authorization to mobilize a fleet, Elena said without preamble. Destination Zelathi Prime, timeline immediate. Morrison's expression hardened. The Zelathi situation? Vasquez, you know that's a political minefield. The Kreneth Dominion has been rattling sabers for months, and Command doesn't want to provoke them into a wider conflict. They're about to commit genocide, sir. 3 warships are in position to bombard the planet. The Zelathi have no defenses, no military. They're merchants and traders. This is slaughter, not war. It's also none of our business, Morrison said, though his tone suggested he didn't entirely believe his own words. We have treaties with the Kreneth. Shaky ones, sure, but treaties nonetheless. If we interfere in what they claim is an internal annexation, we could be starting a war. Elena had expected this response. She'd spent the last 10 minutes reviewing obscure sections of Terran military code, looking for anything that would give her legal standing. She'd found it in an article so old that most officers didn't even know it existed. Sir, I'm invoking Article 7, Section 3 of the Terran Defense Charter. Morrison blinked. What? Article 7, Section 3. Honor debts of officers. It states that any officer who has incurred a personal debt of honor to a non-hostile alien entity has the right to request resources to fulfill that obligation, provided it doesn't compromise Terran security. That's a 200-year-old regulation from the frontier days, Morrison said. No one's invoked it in decades. But it's still in the charter, sir. And I have incurred such a debt. Elena transmitted the full story to Morrison's terminal, the attack on Kepler 438b, the Zelathi rescue, the oath she'd sworn. Morrison read in silence. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. You're really going to do this? Yes, sir. With or without authorization, but I'd prefer to do it legally. That's insubordination. That's honor, sir. And if the Terran Defense Force doesn't stand for honor anymore, then what are we defending? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Elena could see him weighing the political ramifications against the moral imperative. Finally, he spoke. You get one ship, and it has to be volunteers only. I'm not ordering anyone into what could become a shooting war with the Krynoth. One ship is all I need, sir. Which ship? Elena had already made her choice. The TDS repayment. She's due for a shakedown cruise anyway. Fresh out of refit, full weapons load, crew of 3,200. Morrison's eyebrow rose. You want to take a heavy cruiser into Krynoth space? I want to keep a promise, sir. The ship is just a tool. You're insane, Vasquez. You know that? I've been called worse, sir. Morrison authorized the deployment with visible reluctance. Elena immediately sent out the call for volunteers. She was honest in her message to the crew. This was a rescue mission that could turn into a combat situation. They might be starting a war with the Krynoth Dominion. They might be violating half a dozen treaties. And they might be doing it all for a species that most humans had never even heard of. She expected maybe a few hundred volunteers, career officers looking for advancement, or adrenaline junkies seeking action. Within 3 hours, over 3,000 crew members had signed up. The entire complement of the TDS repayment and then some. Lieutenant Chen was the first to volunteer. When Elena asked him why, he simply shrugged. You kept a promise, ma'am. That means something. And if the brass won't back you, the crew will. The TDS repayment was a Valkyrie-class heavy cruiser, one of the most advanced warships in the Terran fleet. She carried enough firepower to level a small moon. With railgun batteries that could accelerate projectiles to 30% of light speed, her armor was layered neutronium composite, capable of withstanding direct nuclear strikes, and her crew was among the best in the fleet. Elena stood on the bridge as the ship prepared for departure. Around her, officers moved with practiced efficiency. Weapon systems were charged. Navigation plotted the fastest route to Zelathi space. Medical bays were prepped for potential casualties. All stations report ready, Chen said from the tactical station. We can depart on your order, Admiral. Elena looked at the holographic display showing Mars' orbit. Earth hung in the distance, a blue marble against the black. Somewhere down there, politicians were probably already screaming about this mission. Let them scream. She had a promise to keep. Take us out, helmsman. Maximum FTL. Destination, Xelathi Prime. Aye, ma'am. Ita 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Elena hoped they weren't too late. The journey through faster-than-light space gave Elena time to prepare her crew. She called daily briefings explaining everything she knew about the Zelathi, the Krynoth, and the situation they were flying into. She shared the story of how Shrix had saved her life, how the Zelathi had risked political consequences to help a dying human. These aren't warriors, she told her assembled officers. They're merchants, traders, peaceful beings who've never hurt anyone. And now they're facing extinction because they happen to live on a planet with valuable resources. Why aren't other species helping them? Someone asked. Because it's not profitable, Elena said bluntly. The Galactic Council talks about peace and justice, but when it comes down to it, they only protect species that can offer something in return. The Zelathi can't, so they're being left to die. And we're different, another officer challenged. We're human, Elena said simply. We remember our debts. We keep our promises. That's what makes us different. She also trained them in the tactics they'd likely face. The Krynoth fought conventionally with overwhelming firepower and numerical superiority. They were good at it, having conquered dozens of systems, but they'd never fought humans before. Terran warfare is different from what the rest of the galaxy practices, Elena explained during a tactical session. We come from a world where we spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We know things about violence that most species never learned. Like what? Chen asked. Like psychological warfare, like fear. Like making the enemy question whether victory is worth the cost. Elena pulled up schematics of Terran weapon systems. Our railguns don't just destroy ships, they vaporize them. Our nuclear-pumped lasers don't just breach armor, they cook everyone inside. We don't fight to win territory. We fight to eliminate threats permanently. The officers were silent, absorbing this. Humans didn't talk about their violent history much around other species. It made them uncomfortable, made diplomacy harder. But Elena needed her crew to understand what they were capable of. If we engage the Krynoth, they're going to learn something the rest of the galaxy seems to have forgotten. Humans are peaceful by choice, not by nature. And when we choose violence, we're very, very good at it. The days passed in preparation, weapons drills, combat simulations, medical teams practicing mass casualty procedures. Elena pushed her crew hard, but she also made sure they understood why. This wasn't about conquest or resources. This was about keeping a promise. This was about showing the galaxy that honor still meant something. On the 18th day of transit, they received a message from Terran Command. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the display and he looked tired. Vasquez, thought you should know. The politicians are losing their minds. Half of them want you court-martialed. The other half want to recall you immediately. Are you ordering me to turn back, sir? No. Technically, you're operating under Article 7, Section 3, which gives you autonomy. But Vasquez, be careful. If you start a war, I can't protect you from the consequences. Understood, sir. But if we don't show up, the Zelathi die. I can live with political consequences. I can't live with breaking my word. Morrison nodded slowly. Good luck, Admiral. Try not to get yourself killed. The channel closed. Elena returned to studying the tactical data on the Krynoth fleet. 3 warships against 1. Poor odds by conventional standards. But humans didn't fight conventionally. On the 20th day, they detected long-range scans of Zelathi Prime. The Krynoth warships were in blockade formation around the planet. There had been no bombardment yet, which meant the Zelathi were still alive. But Elena could see orbital defense platforms destroyed, debris fields indicating recent combat. Time to arrival? She asked. 47 hours, ma'am, the helmsman reported. All hands, this is Admiral Vasquez. Elena's voice echoed through every compartment of the ship. In 47 hours, we're going to arrive at Zelathi Prime. We're going to face 3 Krynoth warships, and they're not going to be happy to see us. Some of you might die. Some of you might never see Earth again. She paused, letting that sink in. But you volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. You chose to be here, and I need you to understand something. When we arrive, we're not just representing the Terran Defense Force. We're representing humanity. We're showing the galaxy what humans stand for. We're showing them that when we make promises, we keep them, no matter the cost. Silence on the bridge. Then Chen spoke up. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. We're with you, all of us. Let's go show these Krynoth bastards what happens when they mess with our friends. A chorus of agreement echoed from the other stations. Elena felt something warm in her chest. Pride maybe, or hope. The final hours passed in tense preparation. Every system was checked and double-checked. Every weapon was primed. Every crew member knew their role. The TDS repayment might be 1 ship, but she was crewed by humans who had chosen to be there, who had volunteered to risk everything for beings they'd never met. Approaching Zelathi Prime, the helmsman announced. Dropping out of FTL in 3 minutes. Elena stood and smoothed her uniform. All hands to battle stations. Weapons hot, shields maximum. When we come out of FTL, I want us ready to fight. Ma'am, Chen said quietly. What's our opening message? Elena thought about that. What do you say when you're about to start a war? What words adequately convey the weight of a promise kept, a debt paid? Tell them we touched their friends. That's all they need to know. 2 minutes to reversion. Elena watched the countdown. Somewhere below, on Zelathi Prime, Shrix was probably wondering if her message had been received. If the human had remembered. If help was coming. 1 minute. It was time to show the galaxy that humans never forgot their debts. Time to show the Krynoth what happened when you threatened someone under Terran protection. 30 seconds. Elena felt calm. This was right. This was what honor demanded. Reverting to normal space in 3, 2, 1. The TDS repayment dropped out of FTL directly between the Krynoth fleet and Zelathi Prime. Weapons charged, shields blazing, ready for war, and the silence began. The TDS repayment materialized in normal space with a burst of Cherenkov radiation that lit up every sensor in the system. On Zelathi Prime, thousands of beings looked up at their sky and saw hope arrive in the form of a human warship. War Master Kratos was in the middle of composing his final ultimatum to the insects below when his tactical officer interrupted. Commander, we have a contact. Single vessel, heavy cruiser configuration, Terran design. Kratos turned to the display, his scaled face showing confusion rather than concern. Terran, what are humans doing here? He opened a communication channel. Unidentified Terran vessel. You have entered Krynoth space without authorization. State your purpose or be fired upon. On the bridge of the repayment, Elena listened to the transmission with cold satisfaction. She'd spent 3 weeks planning this moment, considering every word, every gesture. The Krynoth needed to understand immediately that this wasn't a negotiation. Broadcast on all frequencies, she told her communications officer. I want everyone to hear this. The Krynoth fleet. The Zelathi below, everyone. The officer nodded. Channel open, ma'am. Elena's voice cut through space with absolute clarity. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran defense ship repayment. You are ordered to withdraw from Zelathi space immediately. This system is under Terran protection. There was a pause. Then Kratos laughed. The sound was harsh, contemptuous. Admiral, I don't know what lies the insects told you, but this system is Krynoth territory. We claimed it through right of conquest. You have no jurisdiction here. Wrong, Elena said. 16 years ago, the Zelathi saved my life when I was dying on a frontier world. I swore an oath to them. They called for help, I came. That's all the jurisdiction I need. You came alone? Kratos sounded genuinely amused now. One ship against my fleet? Admiral, I respect your loyalty to the insects, but this is suicide. My 3 warships could tear your vessel apart. You're welcome to try, Elena said, but I'm going to give you one chance to leave peacefully. Withdraw your forces. Acknowledge Zelathi's sovereignty. Do it now and we can all walk away from this. Or what? Kratos challenged. You'll attack us? Start a war between our species over some worthless insects? Elena's eyes were cold. War Master Kratos, let me explain something about humans. We spent 10,000 years fighting each other on our home world. We perfected the art of violence long before we reached the stars. We know things about warfare that would give you nightmares. Threats don't frighten me, human. That's not a threat. That's a warning. Elena nodded to Chen. Tactical lock weapons on the lead Krynoth vessel. All batteries. Weapons locked, ma'am, Chen reported. His voice was steady, professional. Railguns charged. Missiles armed. Awaiting your order. Kratos saw the weapons lock indicators on his displays. For the first time, a hint of uncertainty crept into his voice. You wouldn't dare. Attacking us would be an act of war. You touched my friends, Elena said quietly. That was your act of war. She gestured to her communications officer. Before we begin, open a channel to Zelathi Prime. I want to speak to Hive Mother Shrix. A moment later, a familiar voice filled the bridge. It was older, more tired than Elena remembered, but unmistakable. Elena, is that really you? Hello, old friend, Elena said softly. Sorry I'm late. Had to travel across half the galaxy. You came. Shrix's voice carried wonder and disbelief. After all these years you remembered, I told you I would. Humans never forget their debts. Elena's tone hardened. Shrix, I need you to keep your people inside. Somewhere safe. This is going to get loud. What are you going to do? I'm going to teach the Krynoth a lesson about threatening beings under Terran protection. Elena closed the channel to Zelathi Prime and returned her attention to Kratos. The War Master was consulting with his officers, clearly trying to decide if the lone human ship was bluffing. Last chance, Elena said. Withdraw now. I think not, Kratos replied. All ships target the human vessel. Show them what happens to those who interfere with the Dominion. Elena had expected this, hoped for it even. The Krynoth needed to learn, and lessons taught gently were quickly forgotten. Tactical, she said. Commence firing sequence. Target the lead vessel's weapon systems first. I want them alive to spread the word. Aye, ma'am, firing. What happened next would become legend across the galaxy. Before the first railgun slug left the repayment's barrels, Elena broadcast a single sound across all frequencies. 3 seconds of absolute silence. It echoed through the comm systems of every ship, every station, every receiver in the system. Then the gun fired. The railgun slug was a simple thing. A rod of tungsten carbide accelerated to 30% of light speed. It didn't need explosives or fancy guidance systems. At that velocity, kinetic energy was enough. The slug crossed the distance to the lead Krynoth warship in 0.3 seconds. It struck the vessel's forward weapons array and passed straight through, vaporizing everything in its path. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The Krynoth ship's entire forward section simply ceased to exist, replaced by a cloud of superheated plasma. Emergency klaxons shrieked across the Krynoth fleet. Kratos stared at his damage reports in disbelief. One shot had crippled his flagship. "Return fire," he screamed. "All weapons." The 2 undamaged Krynoth ships opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, missile salvos, particle beams. The barrage that hit the repayment would have obliterated any conventional warship. The repayement's shields flared bright blue, absorbing the impacts. Alarms sounded as power systems strained. But the neutronium composite armor held. The ship rocked but remained intact. Shield strength at 73%, Chen reported. All systems operational. "They hit harder than I expected," Elena admitted. "Recalibrating tactical assessment." She paused for 3 seconds of silence. "Target the second vessel. Full railgun barrage. Fire." 6 railgun slugs launched simultaneously. At 30% of light speed, they hit the second Krynoth ship before its crew could even react. The first 2 struck the engines, turning the propulsion system into an expanding cloud of debris. The next 3 hit along the spine, breaking the ship's back. The 6th punched through the command deck. In 10 seconds, the second Krynoth warship was reduced to a dead hulk, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. Elena broadcast another 3 seconds of silence. "That's 2, she said calmly. "War Master Kratos, I'm going to ask you one more time. Withdraw your forces." Kratos was no longer laughing. His flagship was crippled, one of his escorts was destroyed, and the human ship had barely been scratched. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. The Krynoth had superior numbers, superior positioning. They should have won easily. But the human wasn't fighting like any enemy he'd faced before. The pauses between shots, the deliberate silence. It was psychological warfare designed to maximize fear. And it was working. "You can't win," Kratos said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Even if you destroy my fleet, the Dominion will send more. Dozens of ships, hundreds. You can't protect the insects forever." "I don't need to protect them forever," Elena replied. "I just need to make sure that every Krynoth ship that comes here learns the same lesson. And trust me, War Master, by the time I'm done with you, no Krynoth commander will want to come within 100 light years of Zelathi space." She opened a new channel. This one broadcast across the entire sector. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. Let it be known across the galaxy that the Zelathi people are under Terran protection. Any attack on them will be considered an attack on humanity itself, and humanity does not forgive attacks on its friends." Elena returned her attention to Kratos. "Now about that 3rd ship of yours." The remaining intact Krynoth warship was already moving, its commander trying to get distance from the Terran vessel. Smart but futile. The repayment's engines were more advanced, her speed superior. Tactical deploy missile swarm. Pattern Omega. "Aye, ma'am." Missiles away. 100 small missiles launched from the repayement's tubes. They weren't large weapons. Each carried a nuclear warhead rated at 5 kilotons. Individually, they wouldn't do much damage to a warship's armor, but they didn't attack individually. The missiles spread out in a precise pattern, forming a sphere around the fleeing Krynoth vessel. Then on Elena's command, they detonated simultaneously. 100 small nuclear explosions, all focused inward, created a compression wave that crushed the Krynoth ship like a tin can. The vessel's armor buckled. Bulkheads collapsed. The ship imploded, its own structural integrity turned against it. 3 seconds of silence. "That's 3, Elena said. "Your fleet is destroyed, War Master Kratos. Your flagship is crippled and dying. You have maybe an hour of life support left, so I'm going to make you an offer." Kratos said nothing. He was watching his life support indicators drop, watching his crew struggle with failing systems. Around him, the Krynoth military doctrine of overwhelming force had just been shattered by a single human ship. I'm going to let you live, Elena continued. I'm going to let you limp back to Krynoth space in your broken ship. And I want you to tell your masters exactly what happened here. Tell them that humans keep their promises. Tell them that we protect our friends. Tell them that if they ever threaten the Zelathi again, I'll personally lead a fleet that will turn their homeworld into a debris field. You're bluffing, Kratos said weakly. You can't really do that, can't I? Elena's voice was arctic cold. War Master, do you know what we call our ships? The TDS repayment. Do you know why? Because humans believe in repaying debts, both the good ones and the bad ones. The Zelathi helped me, so I'm repaying that kindness. You threatened them, so now you get to experience the other kind of repayment. She leaned forward in her command chair. Go home, Kratos. Tell your people what you learned here today. Tell them that humanity has drawn a line around the Zelathi, and that crossing that line means death. The Dominion will never accept this, Kratos said. We don't bow to threats. Then you'll learn the hard way. Every ship you send here I'll destroy. Every commander who follows you I'll send home in pieces. Eventually your leaders will realize that the neutronium isn't worth the cost. Because the cost will be paid in Krynoth blood. Elena nodded to Chen. Tactical, disable their weapons and FTL drive, but leave life support intact. Let them drift until they can make repairs. Yes, ma'am, firing. Precise railgun shots took out the flagship's remaining weapons arrays and its FTL engine. Kratos and his crew were left alive but helpless, drifting in space with just enough power to survive. This battle is over, Elena broadcast across all frequencies. The Zelathi system is now under Terran protection. Any vessel entering this space will be hailed and inspected. Any hostile action will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact. She closed the channel and slumped slightly in her chair. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her tired. Status report. Shield generators at 40%, Chen reported. Minor damage to outer hull plating. No casualties. All systems operational. And the Zelathi? Hive Mother Shrix is requesting communication, ma'am. Elena straightened. Put her through. Shrix's voice filled the bridge again, but this time it was thick with emotion. Elena, what you did? We have no words. You came alone against 3 warships. I wasn't alone, Elena corrected. I had 3,200 crew members who volunteered for this mission, and I had a promise to keep. You could have died. Your whole crew could have died. Maybe, but we didn't, and now you're safe. Elena smiled slightly. Besides, I told you 16 years ago that I'd come if you called. Humans keep their promises, Shrix, always. There was a long pause. Then Shrix said something that would be recorded in both human and Zelathi history books. The galaxy thinks they know humans. They think you are violent, aggressive, dangerous. They are right about all of that. But they don't understand that human violence is selective. You save those who help you and you destroy those who hurt them. That is what makes you terrifying. We prefer reliable, Elena said. But terrifying works too. Around the bridge, the crew allowed themselves small smiles. They had won. Against 3 warships, against political opposition, against the odds, they had won, because they had kept a promise. Elena looked at the tactical display at the wrecked Krynoth ships at Zelathi Prime safe below. The silence had fallen just as she'd promised it would. Every time a Terran gun had fired, silence had followed. Silence for the fallen, silence for the debts paid, silence for the promises kept. The galaxy would remember this day. They would remember that humans didn't just talk about honor and loyalty. They proved it with action. They proved it with blood and steel and nuclear fire. They proved it by keeping their word. The aftermath of the battle rippled across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, footage of the engagement had spread to every major system. The images were impossible to ignore. 3 Krynoth warships, pride of the Dominion fleet, reduced to scrap by a single human cruiser. But it wasn't just the military victory that captured attention. It was the reason behind it. One human officer keeping a 16-year-old promise. One human crew volunteering to risk war with a major power for beings they'd never met. The concept baffled most galactic civilizations. In the Galactic Council chambers on Centauri Prime, emergency sessions had been called almost immediately. The council representatives gathered in their floating platforms, projections and physical beings alike, all focused on the crisis that humanity had just created. "This is an outrage," the Krynoth ambassador declared, his scales flushed dark with rage. "The Terrans attacked Dominion vessels without provocation, destroyed 2 warships, and crippled a 3rd. This is an act of war." Ambassador Chen Wei, representing humanity, stood calm and composed. She was Elena's cousin, which some saw as a conflict of interest, but she knew her people well, understood what had driven Elena to act. "Without provocation?" Chen Wei repeated. "Your fleet was preparing to bombard a peaceful world. You issued demands for surrender backed by threats of genocide, and you did all this to a species that has never harmed anyone." The Zelathi system was claimed through legitimate salvage rights, the Krynoth ambassador insisted. "Ancient Dominion treaties give us authority over unclaimed territories." "Zelathi Prime isn't unclaimed. The Zelathi have lived there for 3,000 years. Your treaties are meaningless fabrications." The council moderator, a crystalline being named Selector Vaughn, interrupted. "The legality of Krynoth claims is not the immediate issue. What concerns this council is the Terran military action." "Ambassador Chen Wei, can you explain why your admiral violated established protocols for conflict resolution?" Chen Wei had prepared for this question. She'd spent the last day reviewing Elena's transmissions, understanding the legal framework her cousin had used. Admiral Vasquez acted under Article 7, Section 3 of the Terran Defense Charter. An obscure regulation, yes, but entirely legal. She had incurred a personal debt of honor to the Zelathi. When they called for help, she was obligated to respond. "A debt of honor?" The Vraxian representative, a methane breather whose voice came through translation, sounded confused. "This is not a recognized legal framework in galactic law. It's recognized in human law," Chen Wei countered. "And that's what matters. Admiral Vasquez didn't act as a representative of Earth. She acted as an individual officer exercising her legal rights under Terran code. Any penalties or consequences fall on her alone, not on humanity as a whole." "Convenient," the Krynoth ambassador spat. "You let one of your officers start a war, then claim she acted independently." "Did she start a war?" Chen Wei asked. "Because from where I stand, she ended one. Your fleet was about to commit genocide. She stopped it. If the Dominion chooses to escalate, that's your choice, not ours." The debate continued for hours. Some council members demanded sanctions against humanity. Others pointed out that the Krynoth had been the aggressors. A few quietly admitted that someone needed to stand up to the Dominion's expansion, and they were glad it had been humanity rather than them. The Zelathi representative, Ambassador Terran, finally spoke. His voice was soft but carried weight. "This council failed us. We brought evidence of Krynoth aggression. We showed you the missing ships, the military buildup, the explicit threats, and you did nothing. You called it an internal dispute and told us to negotiate with conquerors." Silence fell across the chamber. Terran continued. "Then one human, remembering a kindness from 16 years ago, came to our aid. She risked her career, her ship, her crew. She kept a promise that no one would have blamed her for forgetting. And now you debate whether she should be punished for it?" "The law must be consistent," Selector Vaughn said. "We cannot allow individual military officers to declare systems under protection based on personal promises." "Why not?" Terran challenged. "Your laws didn't protect us, your treaties didn't save us. Your council's deliberations would have continued while our children died. But human honor, human promises, those saved us. Perhaps the galaxy needs more humans and fewer laws." The statement hung in the air like an accusation. Many council members shifted uncomfortably. The Zelathi were peaceful, respected traders. Hearing them speak with such bitterness was unusual. "This council will take a recess," Selector Vaughn announced. "We will reconvene in 3 days to vote on sanctions and responses." The platforms dispersed. Chen Wei returned to her quarters and immediately opened a secure channel to Mars Command. Admiral Morrison appeared on the screen, looking exhausted. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Mixed," Morrison admitted. "The politicians are split. Half want to give Elena a medal. The other half want to court-martial her. The military brass is mostly on her side, though. Hard to punish someone for winning a 3-to-1 battle with no friendly casualties. And the Krynoth? Will they retaliate? Morrison shook his head. Intelligence suggests they're in shock. Kratos made it back to Dominion space and submitted his report. The Krynoth High Command is apparently having heated debates about whether the neutronium is worth fighting humanity over. Good. That's what Elena wanted, make them afraid to come back. It worked. Too well, maybe. The entire galaxy is reassessing humanity's military capabilities. Some species are requesting defensive treaties with us. Others are getting nervous, worried we'll become the next aggressive empire. Chen Wei sighed. We just want to be left alone. Then we shouldn't have shown them what we're capable of, Morrison said. But what's done is done. Elena broke a Krynoth fleet and established a new doctrine, whether she meant to or not. The Zelathi doctrine, some are calling it. Any species that helps a human in genuine need earns humanity's protection. That's going to have consequences. Everything has consequences. At least these are the kind we can live with. On Zelathi Prime, the celebration was unlike anything the species had ever experienced. The Zelathi weren't warriors. They had no traditions of military victory, no history of triumph in battle. But they understood survival, and they understood gratitude. Elena stood in the great chamber where she'd first recovered 16 years ago. It looked the same, but everything felt different. Then she'd been a broken survivor being helped by strangers. Now she was the savior who had kept her promise. Shirix approached slowly, her movements showing her great age. The battle had taken a toll on the Hive Mother. The stress, the fear, the relief. It had all been too much for her ancient body. Elena, she said, I need to give you something. You don't need to give me anything. I kept my promise. That's all. No, Shirix held out her manipulator limb. In it was Elena's old family crest, the token she'd given all those years ago. This is yours. The debt is paid. Elena took the token and felt its familiar weight. The debt was never about obligation, Shirix. It was about friendship. Then as friends, I ask you to keep it, not as a debt, but as a reminder. You changed everything, Elena, not just for the Zelathi. For everyone, I just kept a promise. You showed the galaxy that promises matter, that honor exists, that some beings still fight for others without expecting reward. Shrix's antennae drooped. I am old, Elena. This will likely be the last time we meet. But I want you to know that saving you all those years ago was the best decision I ever made. Because you saved not just me, not just my colony, but my entire species. Elena felt tears on her cheeks. Don't talk like that. You'll live for years yet, perhaps. But even if I don't, I die knowing that my people will survive. Because they have a friend who keeps promises. Shrix placed a manipulator limb gently on Elena's shoulder. Thank you, Elena Vasquez. For remembering. For coming. For everything. 3 months later, Hive Mother Shrix died peacefully in her sleep. The entire Zelathi civilization mourned. Elena attended the funeral, standing among the thousands of Zelathi in the great chamber. They sang for Shrix, a keening sound that spoke of loss and love and gratitude. Elena left her service medals on Shrix's memorial platform. The ones for bravery, for command, for the Battle of Zelathi Prime. She kept only one, the simple Frontier Service medal she'd worn when they first met. Debt paid, old friend, she whispered. Debt paid. The political fallout continued for months. The Galactic Council eventually issued a formal reprimand to Admiral Vasquez for unauthorized military action. She accepted it without comment. The Terran High Command promoted her to Fleet Admiral and assigned her permanent command of the Zelathi sector. The TDS repayment was retired from active service and placed in permanent orbit around Zelathi Prime. It would serve as a garrison, a reminder and a promise. As long as that ship floated in their sky, the Zelathi knew they were protected. The Krynoth Dominion never returned to Zelathi space. They publicly claimed it was due to diplomatic negotiations and mutual respect for boundaries. Privately, military analysts saw the truth in Kratos' classified report. The War Master had written one line that summarized everything. The humans fight like demons, but worse. Demons you can fight. Demons you can understand. Humans you cannot predict. Cannot frighten, cannot dissuade when they believe they are right. Recommend avoiding conflict with Terran protected systems at all costs. The doctrine spread. Not through treaties or formal agreements, but through word of mouth. Stories told in spaceport bars, warnings shared between merchant captains. Help a human and you gained a friend for life. Harm a human's friend and you learned what silence meant. 10 years after the battle, Elena walked through a memorial garden on Zelathi Prime. The Zelathi had built it to honor Shrix and the friendship between their species. At the center stood a Terran railgun slug, mounted vertically like a monument. It was one of the original shots fired during the battle, recovered from the debris field. The inscription was in both English and Zelathi. They remembered. They came. Silence followed. Elena touched the cold metal, remembering the battle, remembering Shrix, remembering why she'd fought. A young Zelathi approached her, one of the new generation born after the battle. Admiral Vasquez, I'm Crix, Shrix's great-grandchild. I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me, but I do. Because of you, I was born free. Because of you, I grew up on Zelathi Prime instead of in a Krynoth labor camp. Because you kept a promise. Elena smiled. Your great-grandmother saved my life. I just returned the favor. Is it true what they teach us? That humans never forget? We try not to. The good and the bad, we remember it all. Crix's antennae swayed thoughtfully. We have a new saying now. Help a human once and you gain a friend forever. Harm their friends and you learn what true silence means. I've heard that one, Elena said. It's spreading across the galaxy. Good. Let it spread. Let everyone know that some species still believe in honor. Elena stayed on Zelathi Prime for another week, meeting with the Colonial Council, reviewing the defense arrangements, ensuring that the protection she'd promised would continue after she was gone. The Terran garrison was permanent now, staffed by volunteers who had heard the story and wanted to be part of it. Before she left, she visited Shrix's grave one last time. The memorial was simple, just a marker in the Zelathi style, but it was surrounded by offerings. Crystals, flowers from dozens of worlds, tokens from grateful beings across the galaxy. You'd be proud, Elena told the marker. Your people are thriving. Trade is up, the colony is growing, and no one dares threaten them anymore. The wind whispered through the memorial garden, carrying the scent of Zelathi flowers. I'm retiring soon, Elena continued. They want to make me an admiral of the entire fleet, but I think I've done enough. Time to let the next generation take over. But I wanted you to know that I kept my promise. Not just the immediate one, but the greater one. I made sure your people would be safe. Forever. She placed her final service medal on the grave. It was her fleet admiral insignia, the highest rank she'd achieved. For you, old friend. Because none of this would have happened if you hadn't taken a chance on a dying human. You changed the galaxy, Shrix. You just did it by being kind. Elena walked away from the memorial back toward her transport. Around her, Zelathi went about their daily lives, trading, building, raising their young, living in peace because one human had kept a promise. The galaxy had learned something that day at Zelathi Prime. They'd learned that humans were dangerous, yes, but they'd also learned that human violence was selective, directed, and protective. Humans didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought for ideas, honor, loyalty, friendship, and that made them more terrifying than any empire built on conquest. Because you could negotiate with empires. You could make deals, trade territory, find compromises, but you couldn't negotiate with someone who believed that keeping promises was more important than survival. You couldn't make deals with people who valued honor over their own lives. The Krynoth had learned this lesson. Others would learn it too in time. But most importantly, the galaxy had learned that the Zelathi were protected, not by treaties or councils or political arrangements, but by something far more reliable. They were protected by human memory. Elena boarded her transport and looked back at Zelathi Prime one last time. The planet glowed in its sun's light, peaceful and safe. In orbit, the TDS repayment stood watch, a silent guardian. Silence for the fallen, Elena whispered, the phrase that had become her battle cry. And protection for the friends. The transport lifted off, carrying her back to Earth. But part of her would always remain on Zelathi Prime, bound to this world by a promise kept and a friendship that had changed the galaxy. Years later, when young human officers entered the academy, they learned about the Battle of Zelathi Prime. They learned about Admiral Vasquez and the debt she paid. They learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or technology. It was their memory. And every human who graduated from that academy made the same oath that Elena had made. If ever you call, I will answer. If ever you fall, I will stand. Because humans kept their promises. Always. And the silence that followed when they fought was just the beginning of a protection that would last forever. The Zelathi were safe, and the galaxy knew that when a Terran gun fired, silence followed. Not just the silence of battle, but the silence of enemies who learned to stay away. The silence of peace earned through strength and maintained through honor. The silence of a promise kept,